Welcome. You're listening to Entertain You. This is a radio program brought to you by Radio Air Network and Society Bites Network. And I'm Jeannie Corcoran, your friendly neighborhood Sarasota County, Florida Film Commissioner. And my film commission is also sponsoring this show. It's all about entertainment, people who make the entertainment, people who enjoy the entertainment, all forms of media, whether it's live theater, whether it's comedy, whether it's movies, TV, music videos, documentaries, student films, short films, you name it. We're going to have writers, producers, creatives, actors, mimes. No, I think we'll skip the mimes on radio, but we're going to have just about everybody else here. So thank you for listening. And my first guest today, I'm so excited to say, is one of my favorite comedians in the whole world. And he has the greatest little comedy theater in the whole world. And it's right here in Sarasota. And that is the world famous Les MCCURDY.
Hey!
Les, thank you for coming.
Great. Pleasure.
Oh, I'm at your club a few times a year whenever I'm in town, and many, many good friends go there all the time. And I just, first of all, want to just thank you for McCurdy's Comedy Theater. It's a wonderful place.
People thank me, but it is a living, and my alternatives were not near as good. So I thank Sarasota and Bradenton for supporting it all these years. 32.
32 years. Mm-hmm. Wow, and you're only 45 years old, so you were like 13.
Yeah, no.
That's amazing.
No, I'm 87, Jeannie.
You're looking fine.
I know, that's what you say.
I do that too. People will go, how old are you? And I'll say, why do you ask? And then we play the game.
Exactly.
How old do you think I am? I'm not answering that. Good choice.
Yes.
Good choice.
We were just talking about it the other day. You remember David Brenner?
Yes.
Yeah. Johnny Carson. You could just say Carson and people knew who the hell you were talking about.
Mia's generation.
Johnny Carson. Yeah, Mia's generation has to Google search it. But anyway, he was on the Tonight Show with Johnny, and Johnny misquoted his age as being 10 years younger than he was. He never changed it his entire life. That was his age.
That's fabulous.
The day he died, people went, he was what? No.
No, I'm sure that I heard on Johnny
My husband was how old?
Yeah. Like my grandmother, she lied about her age for so many years. When she passed away, my grandfather had no idea what her real age was.
My mother lied about her age by exactly 2 years. Why you would lie 2 years?
Hardly worth it.
But you would think. But my dad thought he married a 21-year-old young lady, and he married a teenager.
Oh, that would explain it.
And the funny part is, my wife Pam did exactly the same thing when we met by 2 years exactly. And how I caught her was about 3 years later, she was living in New York and I was on the road touring. And so I just called her to wish her a happy, I think I was calling her to wish her a happy 24th birthday or 25th maybe. And she was like, 25? I'm 23. And I went, let's do some quick math, shall we, honey? And she went, and I started telling her, she went, oh, yeah.
I forgot that.
And I'm like, why on God's green earth would you tell me you were 23 when you were 21? At the time, I was 27 or 28. She goes, well, I thought that if I was too young, you wouldn't take me seriously. I said, you don't know anything about men at all, do you? At all? You thought younger was going to be a problem?
And she probably put the Catholic schoolgirl skirt with the knee socks in the closet. Wouldn't even wear them for you. Well, when I met my husband, I was 14, and he did not know. And I did not tell. And we were pen pals for like 3 or 4 years because he was in the service. So he still didn't know.
How much? So he was 19?
19, yeah. So he didn't know how young I was. And when he should have gotten a tip when I took him home or when I invited him home to meet my parents, because I couldn't go out on a date unless they met my father.
Right.
And I said, please don't mention that you're in the Navy, and please don't mention your age. Okay. So, 3.5 years later, he comes with a diamond ring to get engaged when I'm graduating from high school, and I think he'd done the math by then.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all you ladies out there, beware. It always catches up to you.
It's against the law, too.
That's
but
right.
No, technically not.
No. Though those were the old days when...
That's right, when that was all fine.
That was
Nobody
just...
cared.
No, not at all.
Right.
All right. So speaking of the old days, I was looking up your bio. I know quite a bit about you. You have one. Well,
really?
I actually kind of created one from scratch.
Good.
I cut one
you
from
just
whole
made
cloth.
one up. I'll go along with it.
I made one up. It says that when Les McCurdy was in his 30s, he began chasing a comedy in career. He was soon headlining around the world, and in 1988, he and his wife Pam, an FSU Asolo Conservatory grad, decided to start a club in Sarasota.
Right.
So you did not get into comedy till you were in your 30s?
Yeah. Well, I was 20. I was right around 26 when I was introduced to it. I'd graduated from University of Memphis, which was Memphis State back then, with a theater degree, and I was going out to Los Angeles to see if I could make something happen.
Be an actor.
That's right. I was going to be an actor. And a buddy of mine, Ken Sons, who lives here in town, we still work together. Ken was in special education, and he had done some documentary films, and he was into that. So he had film equipment, and he was living in Boulder, Denver. And so I decided on the way to stop there, hang out with him for a little while before I went to L.A. to play with cameras, because I had never been in front of a camera. I had only done stage theater. And stage theater doesn't make you any money unless you get on television.
And it's way different than the intimacy of the camera.
It's way different. So I felt like, I could hang out with my buddy for a while, take a little break, and just kind of see what it's like, what I look like in front of the camera, blah, blah, blah. And so while we were there, we were writing little funny sketches, that was just goofing around. And we find out there's a comedy club in Denver, and this was 1980, 81, right in there. And at that time, there weren't many comedy clubs in the country, maybe a couple of dozen, if that. And so we started going. I said, you know what we should do? I said, these little sketches we're writing that we think are funny, we don't know if they're funny. We think they're funny. And I've seen that before, especially with radio personalities. I've seen these radio DJs that have the funny morning show, the hilarious afternoon show, but they're in a box. They're never in front of people. They only get phone calls, so they don't know until they get their first engagement where they have to be in front of a crowd.
And then it's
and they find out that they're not really that funny. And so they're humorous. And so I said, we can trick ourselves. I said, that comedy club's down there, so let's go check it out. And so we went down and started watching, and Roseanne was one of the open micers.
Wow.
And so we signed up for an open mic night, and we did a sketch. We didn't do stand-up. We didn't know how to do stand-up. We did a sketch to see if the laughs happened where we wrote them. And they did. They did. We were quite pleased.
You were naturals.
I guess.
Yeah.
And we thought we were on to something. Of course, you always do. At that point in time, you think you're way better than you are. And so that's what introduced us to stand-up, or introduced me to stand-up comedy, and Ken. And then at that point, all that really was in my mind was that not to make a career out of stand-up comedy, simply to supplement my income. I go, well, if I can figure out how to do this, there seems to be work out there, especially in California. So I thought, this might be a way I can make a little extra money on the side when I'm not getting acting jobs, and maybe offset having to wait tables and bartend as much. So that was really all my thought. And
or be a male stripper.
What's that?
Or be a male stripper.
Jeannie, I thought about that. I mean, there's parts of me that fit male stripper, and I don't have the whole package. Let's just say that. Okay, so anyway, bada bing. But so anyway, I what I did not know was that I was being introduced to stand-up comedy at the moment when it was becoming an emerging art form. And literally, when I was introduced to it, as I said, there was maybe a couple dozen comedy clubs in the country. By 5 years later, there were 200 comedy clubs in the country.
Holy cow.
It exploded. It exploded as an art form. And it was everywhere. Everybody had a comedy club. And so I was just in on the beginning of a fad, and I figured out how to do it well enough to get work, and so that's what propelled me into it. And then at that, I mean, you're talking about doing open mic night at 26. So by the time I was actually out on the road starting to make a little money was about 3 years later. So I was right at 31 years old before I began to work professionally at all.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say this in all seriousness. I'm not shining you on because you're my guest, although I appreciate that. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in the audience, taken company, taken guests. I've had, another couple or a couple of couples, family members, my sister and her husband most recently, and had them say, when you've done the opening and then you brought out the comedians, he was the funniest one we saw tonight.
I get that a lot.
And they like the other people. It's not that they don't like them, but they always say, he was the funniest one tonight.
Well, and tooting my own horn, the thing about it is that before I was a club owner, I was a touring comedian. So I did that for, I need to get a little Kleenex here. I did that for like 10 years. And, oh, yeah, we've got them. We've got them right here. I think we do. No. Obviously, you've had some
Kleenex
very
box.
sad guests in here. But anyway, I toured for 10 years. And so I was a headline comedian for a long time doing that sort of thing. And as soon as you become the club owner, and I had a few other comics, not many comics have done what I did and move into the club business. But when you do, I had a couple of friends of mine who had done it, and they said, you're gonna get a little, you're gonna have to get in check with your ego, because they're not gonna look at you as a comedian anymore. You're the club owner who comes out and is kind of funny in the opening of the show. Literally to the point where people, and it's happened even recently, where people will come up to me and go, you're as funny as any of those other ones. Have you ever thought about really doing this? I mean, really, have you ever thought about, maybe breaking out of the club and really being a comedian? So there is.
How do you respond to that?
I go, yes, I have thought about it. What are you going to say?
Yeah, what are you going to say?
And so that what you have at my club is that I'm a headline comedian too, and so you have a headliner opening the show, you have a headliner closing the show, and then you have support acts in the middle. So generally, everybody on stage, especially me and the closing act, have pretty much the same experience level. And then it's kind of a matter of taste, sort of a thing, So I'm proud of that, and I think it's important. The thing is, when comedy first started around the country, the format in America, because really you had a little bit of comedy. As it broke open, Canada embraced it, and the United States embraced it. You had a little bit in Great Britain, and later on Australia picked it up. It is weird that it's English-speaking countries for whatever reason. Now it's all over the place.
And every language, every barrier, every race, religion, and creed, they all seem to have their own comedians.
Oh yeah. And nowadays they do. It's really been a great thing, So in that light, when it started to open up in this country, I don't know where the hell I'm headed with this, but anyway. I was backing up a little bit. I was in the right place at the right time, and I got good at it.
And you did get good at it, and you continue to be good at it.
Yeah.
And I have seen such a variety of comics in your club,
yes.
which always surprises me. I don't know whether I thought there would be a kind of a standard that you followed, and they'd all sort of be along that, but not at all. It's all over